So for the last several Sundays, we've been working in our gardens, so to speak, reflecting on the ways that plants grow and how there's so many similarities between plants and the way we grow in a life of faith to become stronger and stronger followers of Jesus. We started way out as seeds breaking out of our shells, reaching up like little seedlings toward the warmth of the sun, soaking up all that living water and sharing it, sprinkling it with others when we got the chance, blooming where we're planted, even despite the place where we may be planted amongst all those weeds. We've been talking about growing taller and taller in our faith, supported by church leaders. We've covered a lot of ground. And now, like plants that mature, we're talking about fruit, bearing fruit, all kinds of fruit. Not identical kinds of fruit, but a variety, just like in our gardens. I've been listening closely, and I know that within our congregation, some of us have already harvested peas and lettuce. I've got a picture here to show you of something that's happening right now in our community garden. Tomatoes, can you see them? Yeah, they look bigger on the screen than they actually are yet, but I have every hope that they're going to get bigger. They're kind of hiding right there. We're beginning to bear fruit. How wonderful is that? The Bible talks a lot about fruit, too. It doesn't talk about peas and lettuce and tomatoes so much as other kinds of fruit, olives, grapes, figs. But that's because it's a different part of the country, right? Different kinds of fruit grow there. And the Bible talks about these fruits. Sometimes it's real things that are growing. And often the Bible talks about fruit in a more symbolic way. In the Bible, fruits are often are described as a person's outward actions that have come out of a strong faith. When someone bears fruit in their faith, you know that they've progressed, they've matured. Jesus told the disciples, "I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last." And that's what we're trying to do too, to grow in our faith so we too can bear fruit that will last. Sometimes it's hard to know if we're on the right track. People have been arguing about this for centuries, in fact. I'll never forget in college when one of my religion professors finally asked us, how do you know if somebody's really a Christian? How do you know that somebody's really getting there? We were talking about Jonathan Edwards back in Northampton, Massachusetts. But even way back then, people were asking, how do you know? How do you know if someone's grown enough in their faith that they are actually bearing fruit? How are they really a Christian? And that's really quite simple. It just comes from Galatians. The best gauge we have to tell if we're on track, if we're bearing fruit, is to see if we are bearing the fruit described in Galatians, the fruit of the Spirit. Are our lives full of love, full of peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and our favorite, self-control? That's a tough one. Actually, they're all kind of tough. That's why we need to keep encouraging each other. But we want to bear this kind of fruit. We want to do it right. And being from Alaska, I know about doing it right. We do things in a big way there. I've got another picture here for you. There we go. I wonder who that is. This picture was taken in Matanuska, north of Anchorage, at the Experiment Farm and Extension Center in Palmer, Alaska. Anybody ever been there? All right. You and me, Sherry. There's no snow. This is the land of the midnight sun, Steve. And that's why we can grow cabbages this big, almost as big as my baby brother. Now, granted, he's a little taller now, but things are big in Alaska. I'll just leave it at that. I want to say something snarky about Texans, but I'm trying to bear the fruits of the Spirit. I'll just say that if you cut Alaska in half, Texas would be the third largest state. But that wasn't very good self-control, so obviously you need to keep praying for me. That's our Dodge van. I'll tell you about that some other time. But that is some serious fruit. That's some serious cabbage, is it not? Yeah. We want to bear fruit of the Spirit, good-sized fruit of the Spirit. Can't do it by ourselves, clearly. Takes a lot to get a little tiny seed to grow that big. Likewise, it takes a lot to grow from a little tiny seed of faith into a big, mature plant, a mature Christian bearing wonderful fruits of the Spirit. We have to stay connected to the vine, to Jesus, if we're going to bear fruit of the Spirit. And then, if we stay close to Jesus, we will. Our lives will be fruitful, full of love, joy, faithfulness, gentleness, even self-control. And the beautiful thing is that when we become mature in our faith in that way and bear the fruits of the Spirit, we are all the more able to reach out to others and support others who may be struggling. Because the reality is, almost all of us carry heavy burdens. Sometimes the fruit of our efforts doesn't really feel like the fruit described in Galatians. It just feels heavy. Even wonderful things can feel heavy at times. And so we need each other to support one another through the tough times, to be like that tomato support, surrounding each other in love, anchored in Jesus, supported by leaders, but also embracing each other so that we can all continue to grow stronger and bear the fruit of the Spirit. As Galatians said, bear one another's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So whenever we have an opportunity, let us work for the good of all, especially those of the family of faith. We have this wonderful church community, and when we can manage to stay in it, surrounded by this love, wonderful things happen. Sometimes we know it doesn't always work that way. I've got one more slide for us. It's a little hard to see here. In fact, it's very hard to see. In fact, I can't even see it from, there it is. I went to check my garden, my tomatoes out in the community garden this past week, and I noticed that there was one branch that was sort of pulling off from the side, the main stem, and it had gone out between the tomato cage parts. And I said to it, you need to get back in there. And so I tried to bend it, and I could tell I couldn't bend it completely back underneath the lower rung. And so I had to wrap it around the outside one and then get back into the top ring. And so that one poor branch is sort of going out and then back in again, but I got it back in. And I think it's going to bear fruit better being back in the circle. You know what I'm saying here? I think it's easier to bear fruit when we're surrounded by other people who are also trying to do the same thing. And it's a good place to be. Sometimes we wander out, but you can come back in and be surrounded by that love and keep on growing in faith. So let us continue, as we're able, to come together, to surround each other in love, to remember that's what we're called to do, to bear the fruits of the Spirit, all the fruits of the Spirit, and to encourage each other as we all try to do it together. Amen.